How's it going, everyone? Bryce here with the Soul Ward. And so we have... Hi, is it Josh, right, on the line?
Yes.
Hey, Josh, thanks for joining me. So I was just letting everyone know that who you are. I ran into you on my comment section on my video on At Leaving Faith when she was debating Philbro, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, and you said that you identify, you're more comfortable with the term agnostic rather than atheist, right?
Yes, I would say I'm an atheist as far as just general gods, but or sorry, with a particular god, because then there's actually contradictions that you can find within the religion. But as far as just generally like a deistic god, I think I would be an agnostic.
Agnostic? Okay. Yeah. And I think so to just frame the whole conversation, right? First and foremost, I'd like to say that my best friend, the best man at my wedding, he's agnostic. He is my best friend in the whole world. If I have relationship struggles, I talk to him. He cries on my shoulder, I cry on his. So I'm not one of those Christians who think, if someone's not a Christian, that they're immoral, or it doesn't really get in the way of my personal relationships, though I am a Christian, and I do believe that when I die, my immortal soul will go one of two places, and I pray for his salvation, and he knows that because I believe in the truth. I believe I have the truth, right? So I can get along with everyone of all faiths, all religions. This doesn't have to be an antagonistic conversation. What we're interested in today is more of just the logical framing, right, of a thought experiment, focused on the internal coherence of Christianity. This was rooted around At Leaving Faith's comment that you don't deserve hell, and I was unpacking the thought that moral emotivism could only agree with Christianity. And what I got into in that comment section and in the video was explaining that there's basically a frame shift and it confuses debates. So there's two frames. In one frame, God exists, right? Two frames is worldviews here. Two worldviews. I'm going to call them frames for frame shifting. But in one worldview, God exists, and in the Christian worldview, God is justice. God set up a system of sin and consequence. Justice is a reflection of God's inherent properties, not to be confused with divine command theory, and we can unpack that, because you brought that up, I believe, in the comments. But then when it comes to crime and punishment, God takes more of a covenant approach to crime and punishment, and that morality is objective, based on the object of God. And truth itself is about a theodicy. It's like a journey that God is taking towards us. Truth is personally revelatory, which means revelation, not relative, which means God reveals himself to us and we can experience him. Now, just real quick before we get into it, the other frame is that God does not exist. So if there's no God, then it's just natural law, and that natural consequence yields biological determinism, right, as creatures adapt and evolve and learn new behaviors. So justice is subjective to the community. And a lot of times I hear evolutionary naturalists will say, right, we evolved to have a sense of community, a sense of justice, because we learned that things like murder and all these other horrible things are not beneficial towards the evolutionary process. And so crime and punishment was really championed by Immanuel Kant, who had the concept of retributive justice, which is the punishment must fit the crime. But ultimately, because there's no objective grounding in that, it's subjective to the community. Alex O'Connor, famous atheist philosopher, will say that he appeals to more of what is called moral emotivism. Because it's subjective, all we're really saying is when murder's wrong, we're saying boo murder. And ultimately, truth is rooted in kind of a naturalistic scientism, an empiricism. Truth is empirical. It must be seen, tasted, measured, weighed. So as I've laid out those two frames, my argument is that when you begin to critique Christianity, you will shift into that other frame to make a critique against Christianity. And you can do that, but when you do that, you lose your grounding for Christians, because Christians will go, well, I don't play by those rules. And that's where our whole conversation started. So does that make sense? Where do you want to go out with that?
Are you a presuppositionalist?
Am I a presuppositionalist? So what am I presupposing?
Well, you said a few things there. So, one of the things you claimed is that objective morality can't exist outside of Christianity, but it does. Well, it can, or people think it can. So, like, there are belief systems out there that believe that there is some abstract law of objective morality outside that isn't connected to God, but is still out there.
Yeah, and so to answer that question, I want to frame it. I debate and I engage in conversation many religions, from, Christian cults like Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, to atheists, right, naturalists, evolutionists, and then I go all the way over to, Wicca, right, and pantheism. So when I'm creating that other frame that I laid out, I'm not laying out like it's either this or this. I've laid out the Christian stance, right, the Christian worldview, and I'm laying out the materialistic, naturalist, commonly held worldview. Now, we're not just talking like the new atheists, right, like Hitchens and Dawkins, but this goes all the way back to other naturalist philosophers like Nietzsche, right? And so the idea that there is no, and I really like Alex Rosenberg. He's a famous atheist. He wrote The Atheist Guide to the Universe. I think every atheist should read his book because he does a really good job at pushing Nietzsche a little deeper. But all that being said, the typical materialistic naturalist stance is to deny transcendence, right? And so that's something that at Leaving Faith, I have to keep bringing her up because she framed the conversation. That's where the video started. She said that she denies anything transcendent, right? So what she's saying is that she's denying that there is any sort of anything beyond, like, metaphysical, beyond the natural, right? So when you're talking about justice as something that is maybe transcendent or metaphysical, I could totally entertain that as a worldview to debate or to go at, but it's not the typically held, right, materialistic, naturalist, empiricist, scientism view. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes. I guess the naturalistic view about morality would claim that objective morality and subjective morality, there isn't a significant difference in consequence because in objective morality, we only care about it insofar as we subjectively care about it. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, right? Because on the frame, and when I say it makes sense, I'm saying within the internal coherence of that frame of materialistic naturalism, morality, laws, justice, they're all about utility, right? Is it useful, right? And so if something is not useful, then it's kind of negligible, right? Like, why even talk about it? If we're going to talk about a justice, like, for example, let's say the state of Germany, right there. I talked to a German person. They mentioned the church relationship with their state, and I was like, wow, that's insane. But but like a church-driven state, right? Let's say they push that and they go, you have to go to church, right? Now, a materialistic naturalist philosopher, right, social justice, would say there's no point in going to church, right? So they would look at the utility of it, and they would argue from utility. And they'd say, right, not only is there no point, or then some might even argue it's damaging, right? It's detrimental. I'm thinking about Sam Harris, right? Someone like that who thinks religion is a virus, right? And so it's about utility, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the
But
Christian, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I would say that Christians also have to argue from utility, because what sense does heaven and hell make, or just Christianity in general, if it doesn't benefit humanity?
I like that. I like that. I like that sentence. Let me unpack it. Christians have to argue from utility, because if it doesn't impact humanity, what's the difference? Did I repeat that correctly?
I would like to change that to if
Sure.
it doesn't impact any individual in particular, but then that individual has no reason to care about it.
Okay. Okay. So the word impact there is doing a lot of work, right? If I go to, yeah, so it's a benefit, right? So if I, for example, if I spend less time on my phone, right? We've seen through dopamine, right? And how the brain reacts to dopamine response and cortisol levels, all of that. I will benefit from not looking at my phone as much, right? So benefit can be anything from minor to major, right? If I brush my teeth in the morning, that's beneficial. But if I brush my teeth at night, that's also beneficial. So, but we're not regulating that, right? So when it comes to creating laws, when it comes to civil law, or when it comes to even talking about natural evil, right? And I'm thinking about the atheistic argument from evil, something like that. And we talk about creating a moral system. Do we have to, if we were to fine tune, right, benefit, not benefit, and what I'm actually looking to do is to help you here, because Christians can argue anything's beneficial, right? I mean, even the Bible says all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. So there's a concept where it's like the Christians taking an even less strict stance than your argument. So I'm just trying to help you out a little bit there, because we could argue anything's beneficial, right?
No, I don't think you could.
Okay.
I think you could say that humans have by default, a preference towards pleasure and an avoidance of pain, and that just because of that, you have a framework there of how to judge if something is beneficial or not.
So engage pleasure, avoid pain, right?
Yes.
But what about any major athlete? Like, practice isn't fun, right? I remember playing football in high school and doing two-a-days, right? That was not pleasure. But if I want to engage in pleasure and avoid pain, that's not going to yield positive results. Same with parenting, right? Like, if I love to spoil my kids. Like, gift giving is my favorite thing. To a fault. My wife is constantly holding me back because I'm like, well, I'll buy this new like retro gaming system for my son. It's only $30. But if I continue to spoil my kids, right, that's pleasure upon pleasure upon pleasure. Well, even psychologically, right? Again, you study the neurochemistry of the brain. We have dopamine, right? We've got the way that we deal with addiction. And so hitting the pleasure button over and over and over can hurt us, right? That's how addiction forms.
Isn't that a bit ironic that you argue against pleasure by invoking pain?
We argue against pleasure by invoking pain. So my point.
So you're saying that pleasure is bad because it causes pain. And so what would only follow from that is that the thing that causes more pleasure is better than the thing that causes pleasure but also causes pain, right?
Well, I'm not arguing that pleasure is bad. I'm arguing that the pursuit of pleasure, right, above all else, and the avoidance of pain above all else, right? I'm arguing against that. I'm not saying pleasure is bad. I'm saying hedonism is bad, right? Abject.
But your argument against hedonism, Jesus, is that it doesn't work. But if it does work, then it is good?
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, so you're talking about from utility. So I get what you're saying. So I pointed out that if you engage in just pleasure all the time, that I made a utility argument that utility wise it will be bad, right? And so what I was trying to do was and this is why it's so important about frame shifting, right? I was sitting in your frame and making an internal critique against your frame. I wasn't sitting in the Christian frame and making an internal critique of Christianity. So yes, I did make an argument from utility because I was entering into your arena, right? The materialistic naturalist arena that says pleasure and pain, or not pleasure and pain, but morality and laws are based on utility. And so I wanted to step into your arena, into that frame, and answer it. And this is a really good example of what I'm talking about. If we're not careful, we need to identify if we're making an internal critique of Christianity or if we're making an internal critique of naturalistic process. So how would you like me to answer that? Do you want me to make an argument from Christianity, or do you want me to make an argument from materialistic, naturalistic process?
Well, I would just like to further explain that utility isn't just, we don't just pursue utility for the sake of utility, because utility has to serve a purpose, and the purpose of utility is the pleasure. So those things aren't different, they're the same thing.
Okay, so maximize pleasure, minimize pain. And the understanding, and again, I want to identify, I'm sitting in the internal coherence of your materialistic naturalist frame, right?
And
so I'm
something I would also like to add is that Christianity works within this same construct. You know, we pursue God because he is literal goodness and pleasure. If God wasn't goodness and pleasure, then we wouldn't pursue him. I create an example where God is, heaven is like hell and hell is like heaven. We would pursue hell because it is like the ideals we want. It is full of pleasure and goodness.
So you're not wrong. John Piper, famous theologian, coined the term Christian hedonism. And so his point was, if you want to pursue pleasure in its truest, most raw form, then you should be a Christian. So John Piper and other theologians, and I'm taking his side on this. Well, we'd agree with you. I would say as a Christian, I believe that God's way leads to human flourishing and eternal flourishing, right? Which is even better than naturalistic flourishing. So I can agree with that. It doesn't, but what does that do for an argument against Christianity?
Well, the argument there is if you agree with that, then that means that Christianity is just naturalism with more knowledge. So if you're claiming that Christianity has the exact same goals as naturalism, but that naturalists are still naturalists for some reason, like there is no motive for a naturalist to be a naturalist besides their ignorance, then what you're saying is that God's sending people to hell because they are ignorant, because that is the cause of them going there.
Okay, so we made a leap here, but let's lay it out because I want to be very careful with this, right? So 1 second, I want to unpack exactly what you said. So you said the point of existence is to pursue pleasure, right? Can we say flourishing instead of pleasure? Just because pleasure might have some undertones of addiction, but we say flourishing.
A wide definition.
Yeah. Okay. So humanity exists for, we'll just say flourishing. Humanity exists for flourishing. We're only saying that just because, again, it avoids any confusion with immoral pleasure or incorrect pleasure, right? Someone might get a lot of, like a sociopath would get a lot of pleasure from killing someone, right? And we'd be like, well, that's not flourishing, right? So we'll just say flourishing. Humanity exists for flourishing, okay? And so then therefore, the premise 2 of that is that Christianity and materialistic naturalists both want to flourish, right? Both want to flourish. Okay, I'm just typing this out so I get a good thought process here. Humanity exists for flourishing. I can kind of agree with that. I would have a lot of caveats, but I'm going to grant it for this sake because I think we're on the same page and I don't want to like split hairs. Christianity and materialistic naturalists both want to flourish. Yes. Okay, and then give me your therefore, because I'm not sure. I lost you on how that followed. God is punishing. You went to divine punishment on this one.
So if God determines if humans are only following their motives as far as what they do, so like I have a thing where it's power, knowledge, and will. It's kind of like a play on the idea of, if God is willing and able, then he would prevent pain. So like it's like the same thing but with humans. If people are able and willing to go to heaven, then they would. And do you still hear me?
Yes. Yep. Sorry, I muted my mic so it didn't get feedback. But yeah, so if humans only follow their motives, then they would choose to go to heaven.
And that's generally how people consider free will to work, is that people create choices based off of their character and what we would assume their character would, like how their character would naturally make choices. So if people are able and willing to go to heaven, then they would. And so we already established that both naturalists and Christians have a motive to go to heaven. They have the same motive, which is to pursue pleasure. Pleasure is in heaven. And so they have the same motive. The only two things that are left are knowledge and capability. Of course, you're never going to argue that, naturalists can't go to heaven, but you might say that they don't have the knowledge. And that's still a problem because people don't really control the knowledge they have.
Okay, so hold on. People don't control the knowledge they have. Okay, this is good.
That was poorly phrased.
And we'll refine it. I'm typing it out so we can refine it, because I'll read it back to you. Humanity exists for flourishing. Christianity and materialistic naturalists both want to flourish. We can agree there. If humans only follow their motives, then they would choose to go to heaven. Is that a good summary of that?
Yes, I'm disappointed about how well I'm able to phrase my words. Like it gets the meaning across, but it's just, I don't know, a bit sloppy.
And to be fair, I'm 35, almost 36, and you're 19. And so I want to, it's not about like I'm older and wiser. I want to help you as much as possible, make sure that I'm engaging a good argument, right? And not just winning because I word's good. But we'll stick with it because I think I'm following you there. We can refine it later. And then people don't control the knowledge they have. Now, I want to point out one breakdown between that, and then we can refine it. Motive and outcome, right? I would like to be a millionaire. If I only follow my motive, I would have $1 million in my bank account minimum. But I don't. So motive doesn't determine outcome. Right? You have to have the right process. Does that make sense? Do I still have you? Did I lose you? Uh-oh. Did I lose you? Can you hear me? I think I might have lost him. Is it my fault? Is it my internet? I don't think it is. I'm texting him. Can you hear me? Let's see what happens. Oh, are you back?
I don't know. Am I?
Yeah, I heard him. There you go. And you're back. Okay, so were you able to hear me that whole time?
Yes.
Okay. So where we left off on was motive doesn't determine outcome. You need the right process, right? So if I want to be a millionaire, and if my motive is the only thing that matters, then I have $1 million in my bank account, but I don't.
Well, I didn't say that. I said that you have to have three things. You have to have the knowledge, the power, and the motive.
Okay, good. So that's helping me out on how we connect that. So if humans only follow, so we have to refine point 3. If humans only follow their motives, then they would. Okay, so let's try to help it out here. Humanity exists for flourishing. We agree. Like we all want to go to heaven, right? I think I haven't met an atheist that wouldn't want to go to some sort of paradise after death, right? If such a thing exists, right? If they had to choose between the dichotomy of suffering or happiness, they'd be like, well, yeah, give me the happiness, right? I don't agree with your God. I don't think it exists, but sure. So Christians and naturalists we both want to wind up somewhere good after life, right? Or if we can, if we're forced to choose, we would choose betterment. So if humans only follow their motives, they would choose to go to heaven. I would say and my summary could be just incorrect here, but I'll say if humans could choose, if humans could choose to go to heaven, they would. We agree there. Now the question becomes how. And you said knowledge, you said motive, and you said power. I like this. You're doing good work here, right? Am I following you now?
Yes.
Okay. Knowledge, motive, and power. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that's where I find a lot of common ground. Like I said, my best friend is an agnostic. I'm even friends with a Satanist, right? So like I can meet with these people, and where we agree. It's like my atheist friend had cancer, and I was like, I'm going to pray for you. And he's like, hey, I appreciate that you're reaching out to the highest power you believe in on my behalf, right? He doesn't believe in my God, but he's like, thank you for doing that. So we're all on the same page. We all want the same thing. But you're right. Knowledge, motive, power. Now, go ahead.
You seem to have changed the motive to choice. So do you think you can choose your motives?
Okay, now this is determinism, right? That's what you're talking about. Are your motives determined? So let's not bake too much into that. Let's separate it for understanding the difference, right? I said if humans could choose, right? Now determinism would say humans cannot choose, right?
Yes.
Okay, so premise 3, if humans could choose to go to heaven, they would. I think we need to understand that within either a Christian frame or a deterministic frame, and that's where we'll hit a split on the frame. So far, we've written out a system that could exist for both frames, right? And this is where it's important. Now we're about to take a fork in the road. Do we go to your system or mine? Which way would you like to go?
I'm trying to think because I already I
Because
have lots of notes, but they're rather disorganized.
Yeah.
I would like to try in my mind to. Okay, so if we go down your road, you have to either explain how libertarian free will or compatibilism exist. I get an idea of how compatibilism exists, even though I think it's just admitting determinism is true and then still trying to believe in free will.
I agree with your critique there. Yeah.
So, like, how do you believe libertarian free will comes from?
Good. Okay. So, perfect. So I want to highlight that there's a branch within Christianity. There is one side that believes in determinism, which they call compatibilism. And there's another branch that believes in libertarian free will. And then there's a group in between that they think they're in between. They're called Molinists. They believe in middle knowledge. And that's more in my camp. But I would say they're not in between. They're on the others. They're on libertarian free will. So I believe in libertarian free will. I agree with your critique against Calvinistic Reformed Christians who are just repackaging determinism. So now going down that branch of Christianity, libertarian free will, I have to argue how it can exist, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's very easy for me to say that, and I'm going to let you push back because the easy answer is because God created me with libertarian free will, right? So now unpack how you would come at that.
So, I mean, how I always thought about free will is that it's basically magic. But if I had to guess, you probably wouldn't be able to break down free will into a process that you could explain. Besides, it's just we just do have it. Okay, could you try?
Yeah. And so I would say God created me in his image, right? That's the Christian claim, that we're created in the image of God. So therefore, as created in the image of God, God has creative moral agency. We have creative moral agency in God, right? In our image of God. So how does it look like that? Well, I chose to make a cup of coffee before sitting down. I also chose to have a drink of water. Like I was like, you know what would be really tasty while I talk to you? Some black coffee, right? So I had the thought, black coffee sounds good. I made the choice. I'd like black coffee. That was chosen out of libertarian free will. I don't think evolutionary process determined that I should make a cup of coffee or wear this shirt or put these books on my shelf, right?
But they were prior causes that caused you to have the feeling that black coffee is good. There were prior causes that caused you to have a brain, arms, legs, and a body to pick up the coffee and make it. There were prior causes that created the coffee to begin with. And so I think that you're now kind of in a compatibilist zone.
Well, I would disagree. So prior causes, right? So what you're referencing is contingency and prior cause, right? So my ability to drink coffee is contingent upon the fact that coffee exists. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because I can't drink coffee if coffee doesn't exist. So that's contingency. But tea also exists. I mean, I can't drink tea unless tea exists, but tea exists and coffee exists. So I'm sitting here with water and coffee, but not with an energy drink or tea or, right? And so I think what you're saying is, but I have there are things in my past that have determined I would choose coffee today. For example, the first time I had black coffee, I was at my football coach's house. He put coffee out. I was 16 and I thought, men drink coffee. I will drink this coffee. And I hated the taste of it.
Hope it had a lot of sugar in it.
Yeah, it's in it. I drank it black and it was terrible. But I was like, I'm a man. I'm drinking it. Don't let anyone know I hate it. But to your point, is that what you're saying? That there's things in my past that that unfolded in a way that I would drink coffee. And maybe if we keep going back and back and back,
another way
genetics
to put it is if you think about, not again. Did you mute yourself?
Oh, I mute myself, yeah. But okay. You can hear you, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I can hear my own voice, but that's it. Whatever. Yeah. If you think about like choosing to drink coffee this morning, you wouldn't genuinely say, actually we do say that I could have not chosen to drink coffee this morning. And yet, if you imagine time being rewound to this morning, we can only imagine that you will drink the coffee because that's what happened before. And if you think about it, the future is just like the past. It just hasn't happened yet, right?
So
God knows what happened.
So that is where Molinistic middle knowledge comes into play. What you're referencing is what theologians call A theory of time, B theory of time. So does the future exist, right? Is the question of A theory time, B theory time. So I would say, as someone who believes in libertarian free will, that the future does not exist and that Christian visions of the future, such as the revelation of John, was just that, a dream of the future. John was not actually teleported to the future, right?
Oh, okay. You can still hear me, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so that's not a problem for me. So I can go into a very specific choice and still show how there must be a cause before something can happen. And if there is a cause before something has happened, then that cause determines the thing that happens.
Okay, let's unpack that. If there is a cause before something happens, then hit me with that again. If there's a cause before something happens,
if there is a cause before something happens, then that thing must have been determined by that cause.
Must have been determined by that cause. Yeah, and so so you push me, I fall down, right? Cause and effect. I fell down because you pushed me, right? And so I can agree that certain things, certain actions yield a consequence. And that's actually one of my, in the Christian system, sin and consequence, right? You do something wrong, there's a consequence. Now, the question becomes, and I think this is where we break down at, did you have to push me? Right?
Yes, in order to believe that, you would have to believe that a cause can have two effects and not just one.
And so let's walk down that road, because I would say you didn't have to push me, right? And our whole justice system, I mean, even just civil law in America is based on that premise. Because if you speed, the premise is you could have not sped. Therefore, you get a ticket. So next time you will not speed, right? If you kill someone, you go to prison, because the premise, the assumption is you could have not killed that person. Therefore, you're punished for your choice of murder, right?
Yes, the mind virus of free will is rather widespread.
Yeah, so the Christian doesn't have a problem with that. And this is one of those things where I like a philosopher, James W. Sire, said any worldview to be coherent must be livable, right? And so we live in a libertarian free will worldview within our justice system. Our justice system affirms libertarian free will. It says you can choose not to do crime, and so when you do crime, you're punished, right? So that's the worldview we're currently inhabiting as a culture, even beyond religion, just as a culture. Our whole justice system breaks down if we rely on determinism, because why should we punish a murderer if he had no choice but to murder?
You shouldn't. I believe in rehabilitation.
Yeah, and that's fair, right? So we can bring that up as an alternative justice system. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong. I'm here to defend the coherence of libertarian free will, right?
Right.
And so I don't want to throw stones at what you believe. If it can be coherent, I think if we get to rehabilitation, there's amazing studies that we could go down on that. And I would be fascinated in that, right? I think people can be rehabilitated as well. I don't think all people are able to be rehabilitated. And I don't think everyone deserves a chance to be rehabilitated, right? Let's talk about like a child murderer, right?
Well, we're getting a bit off topic.
Yeah, you're right. Let's stay on topic. And the topic is the internal coherence of Christianity. That's really what we're dealing with here. Because that's what my video was all about, was when At Leaving Faith said, you don't deserve hell, and when she talks about retributive justice, the punishment must fit the crime, she was making an argument from materialistic naturalists' point of view, but she was dressing it up as if she was making a internal critique of Christianity. And so, and I kept catching her in this too, because she would be like, why do I go to hell? Right? Well, you didn't choose God. Well, I can't choose God if he doesn't exist. Boom. But we have to grant that God exists, right? To be in the internal coherence. So the moment she said, I can't believe in God because he doesn't exist, she jumped out of the Christian worldview, hid safely in the materialistic naturalist worldview, but then blamed the Christians for being incoherent. And that doesn't follow logically. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yes, I hope not to get on here to defend someone else's actions.
No.
More here to hear about how you can have two effects from a single cause.
So let's focus on that. How can you have two different effects from a single cause, right? So let's talk about that. Jesus says, love those who persecute you, right? So let's think about that. You push me, I fall down, right? Now I can get up and I can push you back, right? I could be aggressive towards you. Or I could get up and I could say, I forgive you, right? And I would say libertarian free will would affirm that I can do either, right? And like I can forgive you. And this is actually something very fascinating. Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, he was a psychologist and a therapist who went to Auschwitz and survived. And he really struggled. He really just sat there contemplating the human condition and studying the worst of humanity in the worst of conditions, right? Auschwitz. And his takeaway was he created not a Christian practice, it's a therapy called logotherapy. And his stance was basically libertarian free will. His stance was you can always choose, because you can choose to forgive, you can choose not to succumb to despair, right? His point was he didn't choose whether or not he was in Auschwitz. He didn't choose whether or not he would even be killed, right? But he could choose how he could bear that, right? What was handed to him, how he could bear his current circumstances, and that's logotherapy. So
Yes, you said a lot, but you haven't really answered my question.
well, I didn't. I thought I did. So
No?
okay. So to answer your question, all right, let's write it out. To answer your question is how can two different causes, we'll say,
How can a cause have two different effects?
how can a cause have two different effects? Okay. Now, let's be clear here. Because
at the same time, at the same sense,
yeah,
like the same matter, it's a contradiction.
So the law of non-contradiction, right, is that something can not be both A and non-A in the same way at the same time. That's the law of non-contradiction. Now you're asking, how can libertarian free will, how can it violate the law of non-contradiction? Well, that's a false premise, because it doesn't.
Can I please explain?
Sure,
so
go ahead.
When you said that you could choose to push me or you could choose not to, if you look at time and what happens, or even just the decision, like as it happens, only one thing can happen. Either you choose to push me or you choose not to. And if you choose either of those things, something had to cause you to make that choice, because it's a thing that begins to exist, and all things that begin to exist must have a cause. So if something caused you to make your decision, then it really wasn't yours to begin with, was it?
So that's an interesting... You've baked in a lot of different arguments there, but let's identify them, right? How can a cause have two different effects, right? So let's get up to... let's just lay this out. Example, you push me, right, is the example. Now, I either push back, or B, now it's a false dichotomy, but just for the sake of limiting our argument, right? I forgive you, right? There's a million things I can do. Yeah. I'm pointing out that I've set up the false dichotomy, but I'm just saying for the sake of argument, right? Otherwise, we're talking about a myriad of things. So, okay, You push me, I either push back or I forgive you, right? My argument is libertarian free will says I can choose A or B, right? I can choose before anything happens, A or B. Your argument is, so I choose A, right? So I'll put it this way. So I'll just say I choose A. I push you back. I push back, right? Now you're saying that because I pushed you back, I can't change the past, right? I can't go back in time and not push you.
Do you disagree with that?
No, I would say I could have forgiven you. I just chose not to. That's the libertarian free will. I didn't have to push you.
Caused you to do one thing. So, like, say that you did choose to push. Something caused you to do that. If that thing caused you to do that, what that means is that the cause could have only had one effect, and that one effect was whatever you did, which if it was forgiveness, that would have been that. If it was to push, then it would have been that. If you're saying that, you pushed and it could have been you forgave, then what you're saying is that a completely different cause existed, which made you do something different. So two different causes can't exist at the same time and have 100% causal power. Like at that point, you're splitting a cause and saying it's 50-50 or something. So a cause must have one effect.
So so let me identify. You're saying for cause and effect, you're labeling determinism. You're saying that something determined I would choose A.
Yes.
Well, that, again, we're not in that frame, right? We're not in the deterministic frame. We're over in the libertarian free will. Yeah, because remember, like, I'm answering a libertarian free will. I'm not answering determinism. So
all things that begin to exist have a cause?
I believe all things that came into existence had a cause. If something didn't come into existence, it doesn't have a cause.
Your choice came into existence when you made it, so it must have had a cause.
Yeah.
And so you can't have two choices because only one cause exists, and it can only cause one other thing. And because two actions can't happen in the same sense in the same time, Like, only one of them can happen. The cause only determines one of those things to happen. It can't determine both things to happen at the same time.
Okay. Yeah. And so what you're doing is you're baking in determinism, right? So you're talking about we follow all the choices back, and all the choices were determinate upon a prior choice.
Yes, you can extrapolate that out, but I'm only zooming in and observing one single choice in that big causal chain.
So that breaks down. First, that doesn't follow the ideology of libertarian free will. So it doesn't have to answer for an alien concept that doesn't belong within its belief system, right? So if you say, if you're a Christian, how could Allah exist? I'm like, well, he doesn't, right? If you're a Christian, then how did the Jade Emperor create the Monkey King? I'm like, he didn't, right? So it's alien to my belief system. Now, I could go on the offense, right? We could switch to determinism, and I could say, if everything exists because of a choice, right, then we fall into an infinite regress. If there's infinite choices before this choice, how did we get to this choice?
Yes, I think that's a problem that comes up when people try to say that they are able to choose their own desires. And that's a problem you run into.
Yeah, and so I want to point out that if you're going to make an internal critique of Christianity, of the libertarian free will, let's just go there, because that's really what we're talking about. We're not even talking about God at this point. We're talking about libertarian free will versus determinism. So if you're going to critique libertarian free will internally, then you have to stay internal. Now, what you're doing is you're making an external critique of libertarian free will. You're saying, I affirm deterministic process. And because you affirm deterministic process, libertarian free will makes no sense to you. So you're standing outside of it with an external worldview, determinism, and you're making a critique over there, shooting across the bow, which is fine. You can do that, but you're no longer making an internal critique. And so then I have to go over to your side. And this is what I was pointing out too, when atheists do this, when any other religion does this, when Christians do it, this happens to them. The moment I make an external critique of your internal system, we have to leave my system and go to your system to judge it, right? So you say, according to deterministic process, I don't understand how libertarian free will works. So it's no longer about libertarian free will. I have to go, well, let's go over to determinism, right? And now let's live in that system and see if it's internally coherent. Because if determinism is incoherent, if it is logically flawed, right, then it loses its right to critique other systems until it resolves its own flaw. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I don't think that arguing from cause and effect, well, it definitely leads to determinism, but you didn't treat that as a biased idea, cause and effect. I think that's pretty fundamental.
Well, the issue is not cause and effect. The issue is the why and the what and the process that we're arguing between cause and effect. Libertarian free will believes in cause and effect. So does determinism, but they both disagree on how we got there. And determinism has a pretty big flaw, a pretty big logical inconsistency, incoherency. If there's infinite determinate factors before this factor, then how do we get to this factor? And so anytime you go over to libertarian free will, I'm presented with a choice, I make a choice. You're like, and it doesn't have to be determined on anything. I can just make a free choice. Now, I'm limited in my choice, and that's why I believe in soft libertarian free will. So I can't choose to shoot you with laser vision and fly to the moon, right? Like, because I don't have that within, right? So it's soft libertarian free will. So I am limited within my expression, but I can still express within whatever I have the access to express with. So I don't have to push you. I can forgive you, but I definitely can't throw you into the sun, right? But determinism has an issue.
Can I speak?
Sure, go ahead.
So I think what I'm saying is an internal critique because I'm explaining how choices are made. If you can't explain how choices are made without falling into determinism, then I think that's a problem with libertarian free will, not with determinism.
So
one other thing I just remembered is that yes, when you talk about the past infinite regress, I believe that is a problem with determinism. That's why I think it's an internal critique, is because I'm assuming God exists to be the first cause, and then he causes all the other causes. And so God is the determining agent.
Yeah, but I don't believe with the daisy chain of causes.
But you do have to agree with my specific example because I'm simply explaining how cause and effect work in tandem with our individual choices.
So let's lay out your premise, right? So you mentioned it almost as like you kind of use the law of non-contradiction. You also use the Kalam argument within the law of contradiction, identifying first causes.
Do you think the Kalam works?
Well, let's not. I do, but let's not go there, right?
Okay.
Let's stick to your.
That's fine.
Yeah, because I don't want to lose what you're saying here. So lay out your premise on a choice being both the choice and not the choice, like A and non-A in the same way at the same time.
So whenever you make a choice, only one choice can happen. So what I believe happens, you mind if I talk a while because I've actually.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So I believe we have one fundamental desire. That is a desire that governs all other desires, and I believe this desire is to pursue pleasure. And I believe all other desires are loosely based off of this desire, and we kind of do a utilitarian analysis whenever we are making a decision. Does this thing ultimately, in the long term, give me the most pleasure? If it does, then we entertain it. If it doesn't, then we don't. And so with this hierarchy of desires, pleasure's at the top. You could say God is, because, I think that you define God as pleasure. You kind of agreed with me with divine hedonism. We're on the same page. So with this desire pyramid, the top desire determines our decisions because whatever aligns with it the most is the decision that is chosen. And so another interesting way of thinking about this is I believe that if all people had perfect knowledge, I think everyone would act the same. If people had equal knowledge, but then also had equal desires, I guess is a better way to put it, then everyone would act the same because everyone desires the same thing and they all have the same knowledge to pursue that desire. And, I guess you'd also have to equalize power because, if people have various levels of power to pursue that knowledge, then there would be different methods of pursuing the pleasure would be more or less advantageous from person to person. So, gotta collect my thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
So in any individual decision, we are working under a limited framework of knowledge and a limited amount of power, and we have our will, which just is. And so with any particular decision, we think about what we want, which is pleasure, and we think about it with our intelligence, and then according to how much power we have, we decide the best course of action. There is only one best course of action, or one course of action that can happen. And so our will essentially and intelligence come together to create one action. And with all of this information, you can create and rules of basically like moving parts. We can predict that people will choose only one action when given the variables and situation.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and so I want to, because you said a premise and then we moved past it and we got into your internal system.
Yes.
So you can only pursue your greatest desire is kind of what your system kind of reduces to in a sentence, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that is actually a Calvinistic response. The Christian Calvinist says God places desires in us, and we have no choice but to follow that desire, right? And I'm not a Calvinist, but I want to highlight that, right, there is there is overlap within your system and the Calvinistic system because they're both deterministic, right? But you said something at the very beginning. You said whenever you make a choice, only one choice can happen, right? I would reframe that from my view. I would say whenever you make a choice, only one outcome exists in history. Like I could choose something different, but because I made a choice, only one choice exists in history. Like, I'm sitting here drinking coffee. So you're right. If you get in a time machine, 1,000,000 times you're going to see me drinking coffee because that's what I did.
Yes, but in order for a different choice to happen, there has to be a different desire, a different amount of power. Something has to change in order to cause you to do something different.
And that's baking in your view and the Calvinistic view, which is I can only follow my greatest desire, right? But I mean, I desire cheeseburgers every day.
Okay, can I give an example?
Yeah.
Okay, so scientists are trying to discover free will, or how it works. They put a man in a room and they have two cupcakes in front of him. You have a blue one and a red one. And the man is hungry, so he chooses one of the cupcakes. He chooses the red one. What the scientist now does is that he physically resets the man perfectly, and then they see what he does. So the cupcake's erased, his brain is erased. It's as if nothing ever happened. And so the question is, what does he choose? I think he would choose the cupcake again, because that is what he did the last time. And I believe that you could keep on doing this experiment, and every single time he would choose the red cupcake. And that is because the variables are the same. But if he ever chose something different, the only reason that could be is if something changed that caused him to make a different decision.
Yeah, but so, okay, I want to point out that hypothetical, right, is not, it's not, first, it's not reflected in reality, right? We can't do that experiment. It is a thought experiment, right? It's a hypothetical you've laid out, right? And based on your belief, right? It's based on your belief, you have faith that would be the outcome if we could do such a thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I have belief and faith too, like I just believe in something different and have faith in a different outcome. And that's my point. Like,
yes, but I'll open it up to even allow you to predict your own outcome. But, and I'm sure if you did, I'd be able to point out why it would be illogical to believe what might happen would happen. I think it's kind of hard to believe, to even just say that free will would work under this hypothetical, because of how clear it would be what you're doing as far as trying to sneak it in.
Well, and let's be clear, science is still figuring out reality. You know what I mean? Like quantum, I was listening to a quantum physicist and theorist recently saying, if anyone says we understand quantum physics, they're lying, right? Because he's like, we don't know yet, right? We're still on the cusp. And that's why I would say the atheistic, materialistic, naturalist standpoint is a faith in future knowledge. Like, typically that's what atheists reduce themselves to is, well, we don't have the answers, but one day we might, right? It's an appeal to future hope, right? We don't know.
I created a paragraph of notes on just quantum mechanics because so many Christians bring it up, and I can also go into it if you want.
Well, I would just trust the quantum theorist who said we don't understand it, right? Like, we don't. And I have played with, I have a video called Schrodinger's Human, right? Like, and it's all about divine hiddenness and time. I think you'd enjoy that video. But it's basically talking about how, we, like, when it comes to divine hiddenness and the claim of the non-resistant atheist, and because they exist, that God doesn't, because there exists non-resistant non-believers, there must not be a God. My argument is time. Well, if you're not resisting, God's coming for you. Give it time. So they're in superposition. It's Schrodinger's humanity, right? You're right. We don't know if God has revealed himself or not yet. We got to let the experiment play out or open the box.
Do you care to answer the hypothetical and explain what you would think would happen to the person in the cupcakes?
Yeah. So I would say the person with the cupcakes, according to libertarian free will, I believe and I have faith that just like you believe and have faith, right? That the person would choose either cupcake if it really was negligible, right? If there really was red cupcake, blue cupcake, right? Like, sure, have at it, right? If this is an unremarkable human, right? Not a human who was, mugged by the color red, like, then yes, an unremarkable human with no leading information, right, based on, right, like his dad used to beat him while he wore a red sweater, right, or something like that, right?
Do you
Barring
think
any
that's
sort
possible?
of, I think for certain choices, yeah, but I also think we can override our desires, right? So, we can override our desire for revenge.
Okay, so something interesting. Do you think that if he desired both cupcakes equally, that he would be capable of making a decision?
Yeah, I
Okay,
do.
which one would he choose?
Either one. If you my view would be, if you rewound the experiment, it would be a 50-50. You would get a 50-50 sampling. If you did it 100 times, right? Let's for sampling sources, let's say 1,000,000 times, right? Then 500,000 times he'd choose red on average. 500,000 times he'd choose blue on average.
So basically, what I'm getting at is that you have to believe that something is causing him to make the decision. So, like, what you seem to be doing here is like something, I guess is somewhat intuitive, is that you would assume that because it's arbitrary, that his decision would be arbitrary. But everyone always has some sort of bias that, nudges them towards one decision or another, even if it's as arbitrary as red or blue. And so there would always be something, even if it's something as basic as one's on the right hand side and one's on the left hand side, or one's closer, or maybe you find the red or blue more appealing. Like these things come from genetics, even. Like we are genetically predisposed to favor our right arm over our left arm or have a dominant arm. And so there will always be something that nudges them towards one decision or the other. The problem is that if he desired both of them equally, then he wouldn't be able to make a decision because in order to make a decision, you have to desire one more.
So let me help you out here too, because I want to help you also if you want to make this argument against Christians in the future. You have to prove that
But desire causes action.
yeah, like you have to prove.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay,
Man, I
let's do
forgot.
that because right now you haven't
Sorry.
proved that.
Okay, so do you think that you can do something without wanting it?
Yes.
You can.
Yeah, I deal with
So
addicts in my practice of counseling. So I deal with people who are hopelessly addicted and they do what they don't want to do all the time and they hate themselves for it. That's why rehab exists. It's even Christian too. Paul writes in Romans 7, he says, that which I don't want to do, I do. And that which I do want to do, I don't do. Oh, what a wicked man I am. Who will save me from this body of death?
if you do something that you don't want to do, is that really a free choice?
No, I think it's within the soft libertarian. I think prior choices were made. I will even say within soft libertarian free will. So soft, again, like I said, I could punch you, but I can't throw you into the sun, right? I'm limited in my choices. Some people are predisposed to addiction, right? So some of my addicts that I deal with, they didn't have, dads in their lives or they had some trauma going on. So they developed maladaptive coping mechanisms, right? That started small, often in kindergarten, right? Like when they were a kid, they learned attention-seeking behavior, and then that spiraled and manifested to the point where now the soft of the libertarian free will, right? Not the hard, but soft is there are certain things that they need help with, right? But to the point of logotherapy, right? Viktor Frankl would say, but they can't, while they can't choose to be clean, they can choose to want to be clean. They can choose their desire. So
it is actually so because if you do something you don't want to do, it isn't a free choice. It has to be an accident or something determined by something outside of your control. And so it isn't a real choice.
So let's not get caught up in so for example, according to soft libertarian free will, again, that's important. The soft is important, not hard. Soft. Soft means there are some things I cannot choose.
Yes, I'm trying to mentally work this out in my own head because this ties back into what we were talking about before. I'm just trying to remember what we were talking about before.
Because I didn't choose to be a male, right?
Right, desire determines action. That's what it was. So if desire determines action and things that you things that you do that you don't desire are determined by other things and aren't real choices, then desire has to determine action.
So, because soft libertarian free will say that there are certain things that are determined by nature, right?
Sorry. I mean, desire determines free action. Sorry, I just had to adjust that.
Yeah, and let me write that down so we don't lose it. Desire determines free action. Okay. But you can choose your desire.
But you can't. That creates an infinite regress problem.
Why?
By what standard do you choose what you desire? You must first have a desire of what you want your desire to be, and then in order to choose, you have another desire you have to choose to exist.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the Christian response to that is original sin, right? So we're born sinners, right? And so sin comes natural to us. I didn't have to teach my son how to lie. He just discovered it, right? I didn't have to teach my sons how to, fight, right? They just learn it. But due to consequence and parenting and all of that, right? I'm supposed to raise my children in the way they should go, right? So I'm supposed to parent my child correctly. And based on that, they would then say, well, I want God's way, right? And that's why in my original point, I said truth is theodicy. It's God revealing himself to us. So God acknowledges that we're born in original sin. We're born with the wrong desires. And that through a transformation, what Isaiah says, I'll remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Right? Corinthians says we're a new creation in Christ. So through what Christians would call a regeneration, right? Through we can learn a new way, a better way, and that we're supposed to, and that we will answer before God for whether we do or don't. And some people have parents, right? But the argument comes up, well, what about people born in Islam, right? What about people born in Buddhism? And the scripture says God reveals himself to everyone. And so all are without excuse. And so the belief is that God is chasing people not with equality, but with equity. So he might have to work harder to come for you than he did have to come for me, right? Or he might have to work harder to come to someone in China than he would have to come to someone in America. And God will apply that extra effort so that when that person dies, they had every opportunity to have the libertarian free will of choosing God, and they can answer for that choice. That's the Christian worldview.
Okay, so if free choices are determined by desire, and choices not made by desire are determined because they're outside our desire, they're determined by just purely by environment or whatever. And you go to the cupcake example, or perhaps accepting God as your savior, then you're either making that choice based off of desire or emotions, like pleasure, in which case I would consider your knowledge and power, limited power to accept beliefs and knowledge of God to be determinative of whether or not you go to heaven, because you already have the desire to go to heaven, or you're choosing based off of things that aren't in your control. Because, all free choices that aren't determined by desire are determined by just pure accident.
So there's a Christian concept called the age of accountability. The idea is that if someone is not intellectually competent enough to make a choice, right? Born brain dead, right? Died in the womb, which is what Christians would say with abortions, something like that, they go to heaven because they weren't at the catch-all term is age of accountability, but it's not really about age. It's about intellectual competency. So if someone isn't competent enough to choose God, then by default, Christians believe that they go to heaven, right? Not all Christians believe that, but that in my branch of Christianity, they adhere to what's called the age of accountability.
Would you not argue that all atheists or all people who choose hell are not competent to make that decision because they don't make the decision in accordance to their character, as it would be if they had perfect knowledge?
Yeah, so I like that. I like that line of attack. Are atheists not intellectually competent, and we're not calling them dumb, right?
A plea
Let's be
for
clear.
insanity, if you will.
Yeah,
They have
but
to be dumb. They have to be stupid. We're all stupid in some sense, but
sure,
you have to be stupid in the sense of heaven and hell in order to
yeah.
make the wrong decision.
We're too afraid of the word ignorant. It just means you didn't know something. Right.
Fun
So, yeah. So, yeah, I'll take that. So, atheists are ignorant of the truth of God, right? And so they are not intellectually competent to make that choice. Therefore, by default, they should go to heaven, right? That's a great argument. And here's why it would fall flat or be accepted either way. Because Christians believe that God is revealing himself to atheists. That if someone wants to be a Christian, or no, not even that, God reveals himself and they have every opportunity to believe in him, whether it's conversations like these or it's YouTube videos, right? It's a street preacher, whatever, right? We believe that God is pursuing everyone. So the Christian belief is God pursues everyone. Everyone has a chance to respond. So the if-then clause, if God does not pursue someone, then do they go to heaven? We'd say, sure. It doesn't break our argument because we believe he does, right? So, I mean, the Christianity has this concept of the wheat and the tares, which is let God sort them out. Like, we don't know, right? So Christians don't obey this. They should. It's very uncouth to say someone's going to hell, right? We're supposed to be like, I don't know. Like, in their final moment before death, they might have been like Hitchens, who wrote, God's not great. In his last final moment, he could have been like, all right, God, I give up, right? Silently in his brain. No one heard it, right? Split second before death. And he could be in heaven. Like, that's the Christian concept of the wheat and the tares. We just really don't know. You have other people like, there could be apologists who die, right? And like C.S. Lewis wrote amazing works of Christian apologetics. I think he's in heaven. But the reality is, right before death, we don't know. Like, it's between him and God, right? And so that's why Protestants don't really agree with the Catholic concept of canonization of saints. When the Catholics canonize a saint, what they're saying is, this person, definitely in heaven. And we're just like, we can't do that, right? So we don't know if someone's definitely in heaven. We don't know if they're definitely in hell. We trust God. So, yeah, like, to answer your question, I think God's pursuing every single atheist. And if he ever didn't pursue one, then sure, they'd go straight to heaven. But that doesn't fit my view system. I think he did pursue them. And I think they had every opportunity to respond. And I'll never ultimately know, even if famous new atheists like Hitchens are in hell or not, because that's between them and God. That's the wheat and the tares.
So, I mean, right now you're choosing the decision between heaven and hell as a subjective matter. Like, do you like chocolate or vanilla? And I think you could either take that position, or you could take that the position that there is an objective correct or incorrect choice. Now, I personally see it as a math problem. If you have the right ignorance, or the right knowledge, the right power, the right will, then you go to heaven. If you don't have those things, then you go to hell. But if you believe that there's a right and wrong decision to make, then you can't say, well, people just didn't want to be with God. I think that's what C.S. Lewis does, is he tries to say that people want to go to hell, which is just on the face ridiculous, because no one wants to go to hell. It's the place defined as the most undesirable place for a human to be.
Yeah,
so
C.S.
it
Lewis
can't be a free decision.
C.S. Lewis paints it as people hate God.
I don't think that's possible either, because God is defined as the most desirable thing to humans ever, isn't he? Like, he's so desirable that if he were in the presence of us, we would not be able to not choose him.
I don't know of a Bible verse that says that. From a Christian concept standpoint, no, that doesn't follow even from a Christian concept, because people...
Really? You don't think that's why divine hiddenness exists, is because to preserve our free will?
Well, how did Satan reject God? If he's...
That was an example I was going to give to you, is that...
yeah, it's not my belief system. That's why it's not a valid line of attack, right? It's baked in.
Like, it's just interesting. So you think that Lucifer rejected God, that means he had free will, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And he was in a perfect place when he did that. So like, it kind of brings the idea of why didn't God invent us in heaven?
Well, God didn't invent us in heaven because he wanted moral free agents, right? And so he wants
But
people to be in heaven because they want him. He
you
wanted us
just
to have free choice.
Lucifer freely chose not to be with God. See, like you just did the thing. You went to free will to justify why God can't,
Yeah.
why God's presence makes him undeniable.
Well, I can't have the stance that I never said God was undeniable.
You just did.
Well, how did I
How
did?
did Lucifer deny God?
Yeah. Well, that's my point. He did deny God
Okay, why can't we be made in heaven?
because we need free will.
Where was where was Lucifer when he denied God?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's be clear. Okay. Heaven, the concept of heaven often gets misunderstood by a lot of people, most Christians too, who don't have a really good eschatology. But heaven is connection with God, right? It's in his presence. If I were to be brought before God and not be purified, it would kill me, right?
Yeah,
It would,
yeah, that too.
right. So Satan chose within himself to rebel against God, and he had to be removed from God's presence. He can't be with God anymore because he's not perfect. And so heaven's a place for perfection, so he's removed. Now, God could have created us in heaven, but then we wouldn't be human. It would be a different creation altogether. Humanity is created in the image of God, and we are basically choice incarnate, right? When God breathed his breath into Adam, and that same breath was split amongst every single human being, we were given what God has, which is moral agency. So human beings are the incarnation of choice, and we have one calling: to choose God. If we don't choose God, we have denied our creative purpose, and we get what we choose. When we die, we didn't choose God, so we don't get God. And that's hell.
Well, usually Christians' whole argument about why God didn't invent us in heaven is free will, as you kind of previously said.
Well, yeah, choice
Um,
incarnate. We've got to be
I
created on earth.
Well, my argument against that is that being human kind of sucks, and like even God thinks that. God's plan is to give us entirely different bodies to live in heaven. So why didn't He just do that to begin with?
Yeah, well, the scripture says we'll rule over angels in the new kingdom, right? And so there's a reality there that we need experience. Like, how are we to rule over angels? And so there's different views on this. My view is not going to be the definitive view, right? But one of the views that I like is that how do we judge angels, right? We have to know what it's like to be here. Not only that, but God is giving us right here on earth. Yeah, it's kind of like purgatory, right? It's a taste of heaven, joy, peace, love, goodness, right? And it's a taste of hell, war, famine, death, right? And so God is revealing to us that he is the love, the peace, the joy, right? We should choose him. But people reject God. And this is why stories like the prodigal son, where the prodigal son told the father, I want your good stuff, but I don't want a relationship with you. And that doesn't work. In fact, actually, prodigal son shows what happens. If we could somehow take a portion of God's goodness, his good attributes, and squirrel it away from him, it would run out. And then where do we have to go? Back to the Father, right? Because if he's the source of it, then we have to keep returning to him as the source of it. And so that's why certain parables like that exist, to show these concepts.
Okay, that did make me think of a different argument I had, but I still want to stick with, do you believe that there's like different levels of free will or something? Because I don't see how you're justifying creating people on earth when God could have just made us in heaven if the free will thing, if we can have free will in both places. And also just a different thought is, do you believe we will have free will when we're in heaven? Because Lucifer did.
Yeah, I believe we'll have free will in heaven. And I want to preface too, my son has just woken up, so I got to go get him here in a second. So we'll wrap up, but I do appreciate your time. So I want to say that when it comes to why did God set up the system he set up, right? Heaven, hell, justification. Why did God have to send himself to be crucified, right? All of these questions we could ask. Christians can guess. We can say, this is why, right? But the reality is that the relationship we're supposed to have is a father and son relationship, right? That's why having kids really set my Christianity in, I think, a proper place. If my kids don't have to know why I tell them everything I tell them, right? If my kids ask me every night, can we have dessert? And most of the time I say yes. Sometimes I say no. And they can ask for my reasoning, and I can give it. Sometimes they won't understand my reasoning. And they don't have to question every motive of mine to trust me. And so I'll tell you, I can't perfectly understand an infinite being, right? And I think all these books on my shelf, I think all these ones are theology. These are just comic books. But I think all of these are just journals, right, of people who've spent time with God. That's why they disagree so much. And they have freedom to disagree. The Bible says, let each, like, who are you to judge another man's servant? Let each be convinced in their own mind. I think denominations exist of Christianity because we have the freedom for them to exist. Ultimately, we don't have to understand God to go to heaven. We just have to trust him to go to heaven. And that's what it is. Like even with God chasing atheists, right? I've got atheist friends that I want to go to heaven. And I think I have a small part to play in their life of being some sort of point of truth. But ultimately, I just have to trust that God's chasing them, right? Like, I just be like, Lord, I know you love them more than I love them, and so I just trust that you're chasing them. I have that same thing with people who have died, right? I've lost loved ones, and I've seen their family grow up with pain, right? My brother-in-law died with 4 small children, and I've watched those children grow up without a dad. And I have to go, man, I don't understand that, but I just trust that God is good, and I'm just going to trust him through the process. And ultimately, Christians just appeal to the fact that, yes, this life does suck, but it is temporary. In the same way, like, hitting the gym sucks, but we believe it yields good. And that's why I have issues with, like, Alex O'Connor's critique of the existence of evil, right? It's because he tries to justify it within a closed system. You have to make sense of evil on earth, and Christians don't have to make that argument. We get to say, no, it gets to make sense after we die. I get why that frustrates scientism. I get why that frustrates materialistic naturalism, right? No, we have to know, right? But ultimately, yeah, it's trust. We have to trust God, right? It's not trust if I have to understand every element of him. My son is crying. I gotta go get him, but I want to give you time to respond to that. So any closing refutations on that or anything like that?
I guess the only other thing I would say is that if you do believe that people have free will in heaven, that either necessarily means that some of them will choose to sin and go to hell, and over time I couldn't imagine everyone eventually choosing that, just, I don't know, for whatever reason. But if that isn't possible, and it's possible for everyone to freely choose to stay in heaven, then that means that it's a possible world that God could have created an earth where everyone chose him to begin with.
I think that's a fantastic critique. And I think that critique deserves probably me to go make a whole 30-minute video on it, which you could probably look forward to. Because I think that's a fantastic critique.
Putting it in the end, I was thinking about just commenting it, just because I know you'd have to spend a lot of time responding to it.
Yeah, I actually love that question. I think it raises a great, and it warrants a response. So I gotta go get my baby, but thank you for your time, Josh. And you've really floated out some great arguments. I have them typed on the screen. I think you were very kind, very respectful, and I loved this kind of discourse that we're able to have.
Same to you. I'm always happy to talk about religion.
Thank you. Well, maybe I'll have you on again sometime, or I look forward to seeing you in the comments. But if it's okay, I'll post this so everyone can see and react to it, and you can comment to it. Is that okay?
That's all right.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll get it uploaded probably this afternoon.
Okay.
All right. See ya. Have a good one. Bye.
See ya.